Imagine a Premier League season where a team only wins one game, just one. Out of 38 matches, sounds impossible, right? But it happened, and it's not even the worst part of their story. Welcome to the dark underbelly of England's top flight, where dreams turn to nightmares, and once proud clubs are reduced to punchlines. These are the tales of the 5 worst teams in Premier League history. The Premier League, established in 1992, has long been hailed as one of the most competitive and exciting football leagues in the world. It's a place where legends are born, where underdogs occasionally triumph, and where the drama never seems to end. But for every fairy tale rise, there's a catastrophic fall. The league operates on a simple point system: 3 points for a win, 1 for a draw, and none for a loss. Teams battle not just for glory at the top, but to avoid the dreaded relegation zone at the bottom. The magic number? 40 points. Hit that and you're usually safe. Fall short and you might find yourself tumbling down to the championship. But some teams don't just fall short, they plummet spectacularly, leaving fans, pundits, and even rival supporters in a state of disbelief. These are the teams we're about to dissect, the ones who redefined what it means to struggle in the Premier League. The Premier League has seen its fair share of nail-biting relegation battles over the years. Usually, it's a tight race, with teams scrapping for every point until the final day of the season. But sometimes, a team's fate is sealed long before the final day. Picture this: it's a crisp autumn day, and the season is still young. Most clubs are finding their rhythm, ironing out early kinks and setting their sights on lofty goals. But for some unfortunate souls, the writing is already on the wall. Losses pile up and the gap between them and safety grows wider with each passing week. Fans start to dread match days. The once electric atmosphere in the stadium turns sour, with boos and jeers replacing cheers and chants. Players look lost on the pitch, their confidence shattered. Managers come and go, each one promising to right the ship, but ending up as another casualty in a season of chaos. The media circus begins. Every poor performance is dissected, every mistake magnified. Pundits who once praised these teams now struggle to find words to describe their ineptitude. Social media becomes a breeding ground for memes and jokes at the struggling team's expense. But it's not just about the on-field performance. Behind the scenes, financial woes often compound the misery. Star players eye the exit, unwilling to go down with the sinking ship. The club's value plummets, and suddenly, survival becomes about more than just staying in the Premier League. It's about the very existence of the club itself. Let's start our journey into Premier League infamy with Derby County's 2007-8 season. If there was ever a textbook example of how not to do a Premier League campaign, this would be it. Derby, a proud club with a rich history, had fought their way back to the top flight, but their joy was short-lived. From the very first kickoff, it was clear Derby were out of their depth. They actually won a point in their opening game, drawing 2-2 with Portsmouth, but things only went downhill from there. By the time they secured their first and only win of the season, a 1-0 victory over Newcastle in September, they had already lost 4 games. But wait, it gets worse. Derby's defence was about as effective as a chocolate teapot. They conceded a whopping 89 goals over the course of the season. To put that in perspective, that's more than 2 goals per game. Opposing strikers must have been licking their lips every time Derby came to town. And goals? They were as rare as a blue moon for Derby. They managed to score just 20 times in 38 games. That's right, the entire team scored fewer goals than many individual strikers do in a season. The final tally? 1 win, 8 draws, and 29 losses. A grand total of 11 points. It's a record that still stands today, and one that Derby fans will probably wish they could forget. But Derby isn't alone in the Hall of Shame. Let's move on to Sunderland's 2005-6 season. The Black Cats had high hopes after promotion, but those hopes were quickly dashed. They started the season with 5 straight losses and never really recovered. Sunderland's problem wasn't just that they were losing, it was how they were losing. They suffered some truly humiliating defeats, including a 4-1 thrashing by Portsmouth and a 4-1 drubbing by Newcastle. By Christmas, they had managed just 5 points from 17 games. Manager Mick McCarthy, who had led the team to promotion, found himself out of a job by February. But even a change at the helm couldn't stop the rot. Sunderland finished the season with just 15 points, having won only 3 games. Fast forward to 2018-19 and we find Huddersfield Town writing their own chapter in the book of Premier League disasters. The Terriers had defied expectations by staying up in their debut Premier League season, but their second year was a different story entirely. Huddersfield's problem was simple. They couldn't score goals. They managed just 22 all season and went through a period where they scored just 5 times in 20 games. That's the kind of drought that would make even a cactus wilt. The arrival of Jan Siewert as manager in January was supposed to spark a turnaround. Instead, it was more of the same. Huddersfield's fate was sealed with 6 games still to play, a joint Premier League record for the earliest relegation. They finished the season with just 16 points and 3 wins to their name. But let's not forget Aston Villa's 2015-16 season. This wasn't just any club struggling. This was Aston Villa, one of the founding members of the Football League, a European Cup winner, a titan of English football. And they were in freefall. Villa's season was a perfect storm of poor management, questionable player recruitment, and behind-the-scenes turmoil. They went through 4 managers over the course of the season, each one seemingly more out of his depth than the last. On the pitch, Villa were dire. They won just 3 games all season, and at one point went 19 games without a victory. By the time they were officially relegated in April, it felt like a mercy killing. They were relegated with only 17 points to their name. And then there's Sunderland again, this time in 2002-03. Lightning does strike twice, it seems. The Black Cats had actually finished 7th just 2 seasons earlier, but now found themselves in a nightmare. Sunderland's season was characterised by streaks of futility. They actually picked up 18 points in the first half of the season with 4 wins, but a terrible run of 18 losses and 1 draw in the second half of the season sealed their fate. Manager Peter Reid was shown the door in October, but his replacement, Howard Wilkinson, fared no better. The low point, a 4-0 home defeat to Arsenal on the final day that confirmed their relegation with a then record low of 19 points. It was a far cry from their top half finish just 2 years earlier. In the wake of these disastrous seasons, the fallout was swift and severe. For Derby County, the embarrassment of their record-breaking low points total lingered long after the final whistle of their last Premier League game. Manager Paul Jules, who had taken over midway through the season, offered to resign. The club declined, but Jules left anyway just a few months into the following season. The Derby players, once full of hope and ambition, now found themselves the butt of jokes across the football world. Many moved on quickly, eager to distance themselves from the debacle. The fans, loyal to the end, were left to pick up the pieces of their shattered dreams. Sunderland's 2005-06 season left the club in turmoil. The financial impact of relegation was immediate and harsh. Star players jumped ship, unwilling to play in the Championship. The club was forced to slash its wage bill and sell assets just to stay afloat. The Black Cats' reputation took a massive hit. Once seen as a solid mid-table Premier League club, they were now viewed as something of a joke. It would take years for them to shake off the stigma of that disastrous campaign. Huddersfield Town's relegation in 2019 was perhaps less surprising given their status as relative Premier League newcomers, but no less painful. The club's owner, Dean Hoyle, who had overseen their rise to the top flight, stepped down due to health issues. The Terriers faced a mass exodus of players, with many of their top performers seeking to remain in the Premier League. The challenge of rebuilding a competitive squad while dealing with the financial realities of relegation looms large. Aston Villa's fall from grace in 2016 was particularly shocking given their status as a Premier League ever-present. The club's American owner, Randy Lerner, who had been trying to sell for years, finally found a buyer in Chinese businessman Tony Xia. But the damage was done. Villa Park, once a fortress, had become a toxic environment. Fans who had supported the club through thick and thin now stayed away in droves, unable to stomach the dire performances on the pitch. For Sunderland in 2003, the aftermath was a mix of soul-searching and restructuring. The club, which had invested heavily in its stadium and training facilities during the good times, now faced a financial reckoning. The high-earning players who had underperformed so spectacularly were moved on, replaced by cheaper, hungrier alternatives. In all these cases, the immediate aftermath was characterised by chaos and uncertainty. Jobs were lost, not just on the pitch, but throughout the clubs. The ripple effects were felt in local communities, where these clubs were often major employers. But perhaps the most painful aspect was the loss of status. These clubs, once mixing with the elite of English football, now found themselves preparing for trips to unfamiliar outposts in the lower leagues. The glamour of the Premier League seemed a distant memory. replaced by the harsh reality of life in the Championship. The long-term impacts of these disastrous seasons were far-reaching and, in some cases, are still being felt today. For Derby County, the 2007-8 season marked the beginning of a prolonged period of instability. While they initially bounced back with a decent showing in the Championship, financial issues began to plague the club. Years of mismanagement and overspending in pursuit of a Premier League return eventually caught up with Derby. In 2021, the club entered administration and was docked 12 points, effectively condemning them to relegation to League One. The ghost of that record-breaking Premier League season still haunts Pride Park. Sunderland's 2005-6 relegation kicked off an era of uncertainty for the club. They did manage to return to the Premier League after just one season in the Championship, becoming a Premier League regular for 10 consecutive seasons before suffering another relegation in 2017. What followed was a dramatic fall from grace, with the Black Cats enduring back-to-back relegations to find themselves in League One by 2018. The financial impact was severe. Sunderland's state-of-the-art Stadium of Light, built for Premier League football, now hosted third-tier matches. The club's training ground was sold to cut costs. It wasn't until 2022 that Sunderland finally clawed their way back to the Championship. Huddersfield Town's relegation in 2019 marked the end of their Premier League dream, at least for now. The club has since established itself as a solid Championship side, but the financial gulf between the two top tiers of English football means a return to the Premier League remains a significant challenge. The Terriers have had to adapt to life outside of the top flight, focusing on developing young talent and making shrewd signings rather than splashing the cash. It's a strategy born out of necessity, but one that could serve them well in the long run. Aston Villa's relegation in 2016 was a seismic shock to the club system. The financial implications were enormous, with Villa having to offload many high-earning players. However, unlike some others on this list, Villa's story has a happier ending. After 3 seasons in the Championship, they returned to the Premier League in 2019. Under the ownership of billionaires Nassif Sawiris and Wes Edens, Villa have since re-established themselves as a force in the top flight and are even playing in the UEFA Champions League. Their 2015-16 nightmare now serves as a cautionary tale and a motivation to never let standards slip so dramatically again. For the fans, these seasons left deep scars. The pain of watching their beloved teams humiliated week after week lingers long in the memory. But football is a game of hope, and even in the darkest times, supporters cling to the belief that better days are around the corner. These cautionary tales have also had a wider impact on English football. They've led to increased scrutiny of clubs' financial dealings and more stringent rules around sustainability. The idea that any club is too big to go down has been thoroughly debunked. For players, these seasons serve as a warning about the fleeting nature of success in football. Many who were part of these struggling sides saw their careers take significant hits, a reminder that individual reputations are often tied to team performance. In the broader context of the Premier League, these seasons have become part of the league's law. They're the benchmark against which all poor performances are measured. When a team is struggling, it's not uncommon to hear pundits ask, but are they as bad as that Derby team? As we've seen, the Premier League can be a cruel mistress, capable of humbling even the most storied clubs. But for every fall, there's a rise. Speaking of which, have you ever wondered why some are tipping Liverpool to be the 2025 Premier League champions? Click the video on the screen now to find out.